In one of our recent videos, we looked at the HAL Tejas and compared it to the JF-17 and tried to see some of the differences about this aircraft while finding some similarities between the two. But today, I'm just going to dedicate this whole video around India's made HAL Tejas fighter and discover a little bit more about the aircraft and find out what is unique about it. How's it going, everybody? My name is Dave Wapple and welcome to FTD Facts, the channel where I look at people, cultures, and places from all around the world. Now today, pretty excited because, yeah, I like the HAL Tejas. I think it's really interesting that India has its own unique fighter that kind of makes it very special for the people who might be watching this video that are from India. But more specifically, I like to do stuff that a lot of you guys recommend, so, going into this fighter seems to be something that I know you guys will really like. With that, by the way, before I get into this video, if you guys are into military playlists, just to let you know, although we have a diverse amount of content here on FTD Facts, if you want to know more specifically about Indian military topics, I got some playlists throughout this video that I'll put in the cards and the description box below that you guys can check out at any time. But I'll talk a little bit more about that because I kind of want to get into the facts, but I just want to let you guys know the kind of stuff that we do here in case you felt like hitting that subscribe button at any time in this video. So let's just jump right into it. So we got the HAL Tejas. It is classified as a single-seat, single-engine, multi-role fighter. And for the facts, you might be wondering, why is it sometimes called the LCA? Well, there's a reason for that. This is because this fighter was developed under what was known as the Light Combat Aircraft Program, which was a development program conducted by India for a long time, and I'm going to get into that. However, as for the name Tejas, it didn't get this name until about 2003. Now, one thing that is super important when it comes to the HAL Tejas is it is classified as a supersonic fighter. And not only that, but it is the second supersonic fighter that was developed by an Indian company, and this company is known as the famous Hindustan Aeronautics Company. Also, not only that, it's also the smallest and lightest supersonic aircraft of any of its type in the entire world. And yes, when I say small, it is a rather small aircraft. Because for the size of this aircraft, it comes in at a height of 4.40 meters with a length of 13.20 meters and a width or wingspan of 8.20, which makes it just a little bit smaller than some other craft of its type. Now, let's take a look at why this aircraft was built in the first place. Pretty much back in the day, India knew that it needed to develop a new fighter that would replace its ever-aging MiG-21s. Because by the 1980s, they eventually knew that the MiG-21s would be completely outdated despite the amount of upgrades that they would receive. And in the 1980s, this was realistically the beginning of the Light Combat Aircraft Program. Specifically, actually in 1989, when the LCA Program Review Committee was formed. And for the development of its own unique aircraft, by 1993, the first proof of concept for this fighter was brought in. As a matter of fact, the first two proof of concept aircrafts that were made were known as TD-1 and TD-2. And for TD-1, it had its first flight on January 4th, 2001, in which shortly after prototypes emerged from that. And the cost of this first real phase of program came to approximately 2,188 crore. So one thing when it came to the Light Combat Aircraft Program, India tried to develop a lot of different things on their own instead of use technology from other countries. One thing that was definitely heavily in production was India's very own fly-by-wire program, which began development in 1992. Also, for what we now know as the HAL Tejas, it was originally intended to have an Indian-made radar system. And although that might have been developed, there was unfortunately some compatibility issues, so they had to move on to something else. With that, Hindustan Aeronautics Company went with the Israeli radar known as the ELTA systems, using the specific radar system known as the ELM 2032. However, in 2008, that's actually changed, especially in the Mark 1A version, because these new HAL Tejas, they use what is known as the ELM 2052 version. However, it is still an Israeli-made radar. But to jump back a little bit, after several tests in 2005, the Indian Air Force put an order for 20 of these fighters. Now, this actually didn't really mean it was actually cleared for the Air Force. A lot of testing happened after this. As a matter of fact, the first real maiden flight of this first limited series production, known as LSP-1, took place in Hansagoa on April 25, 2007, in which the aircraft reached a speed of Mach 1.1. And it was shortly after that the Indian Navy had intended to purchase 50 of these aircraft. However, the first prototype, known as NP-1, was given to them in July of 2010. And it was actually about a year after that the IAF, the Indian Air Force, pretty much kind of approved the design of this fighter. This is because on January 10th of 2011, it was approved for initial operation clearance by the Air Force. Shortly after that, the naval version made its first flight on April 27th, 2012. Unfortunately, the naval version wasn't accepted. I'm going to get into that because I'm going to talk a little bit about variants a little bit further on. Because it was around this time that although the Indian Air Force had given initial operation clearance, this didn't mean it had final operation clearance, and that's what you really want as a fighter. As a matter of fact, the major campaign for final operation clearance began in 2013, but I found it very interesting and yes, also unfortunate that because of several setbacks, final operation clearance wasn't given to the HAL Tejas until recent. As a matter of fact, February 20th, 2019. Insane. That's a lot of years, man. I mean, that fighter is just going through the ringer. And the part that I found really fascinating about this is, although it wasn't given final operation clearance until recent, the IAF had a lot of interest in this fighter. As a matter of fact, in 2015, they purchased 120 of them. And as a matter of fact, in 2011, they had their first squadron formed. This was known as the Flying Daggers, or Number 45 Squad, which operated out of the Yelahanka Air Base in Bangalore. I should also update you guys and let you know that this squadron has now moved to the Suller Air Force Station in Coimbatore. As a matter of fact, as of February 1st, 2019, this squadron has 14 of these aircrafts, but by the end of the year, it's planned to have another 2 of the initially cleared fighters, and they also plan to add 16 of the finally cleared aircrafts to join by the end of the year. Also, it's a rather new aircraft to the rest of the world because it was internationally debuted in 2016, and this was at the Bahrain International Air Show. So now let's just take a quick peek at versions and some of the specifications. Now, in my previous video, I did talk about that, so I'm going to kind of go through this one really quick because for some of you guys who've already seen this kind of information, I don't want to be repeating a lot of facts. So first of all, you have your initial version. On top of that, there's a trainer version, which is a 2-seater. You've also got the Navy versions, which I did state in 2016, it unfortunately failed to meet the requirements in weight. Basically, they found that this aircraft was too heavy for the aircraft carriers, and in 2017, they're going to get a new test to see if they will work. The more recent version, the Mk1A, is unfortunately more expensive. However, it has new radar and a bunch of other upgrades. The Mk2 has been recently displayed in 2019. It is slightly bigger with a larger payload and has a more powerful engine. And speaking about engine, let's take a look at speed. The fastest that this thing has clocked comes in at Mach 1.8 with a range of 850 kilometers and a combat radius of 500 kilometers. And with that, when we look at the engines, one interesting fact is that the original aircrafts used the American-made General Electric F404 engine. However, remember how I said the LCA was aiming to make, Indian-made products for these planes? Well, one thing that came out of that was also an engine. Unfortunately, it wasn't the best. This was known as the Kaveri engine, and unfortunately, it didn't meet the requirements. But on a side note, which some of you guys, you plane enthusiasts might find this very interesting, the actual engine itself couldn't be tested in India and actually had to go to Russia. The reason for this is because India unfortunately didn't have the facilities built in to test its high altitude abilities. And apparently with that, Russia used the Tu-16 aircraft to conduct this test. And of course, when it comes to specifications, we got to talk about weapons. Now, currently this aircraft can use 9 different types of weapons. Basically, you have the 23mm gun in the front, and of course you have 8 hardpoints, which are located under the wings and the fuselage and can either be bombs, missiles, or whatever you feel. As for the entire program cost, including its research, Phase 1 and Phase 2, it came in at 7,965.56 crore. And for an individual fighter, let's look at the Mark 1 and the Mark 1A. Basically, the Mark 1 comes in at 162 crore, which is approximately $23 million. And of course, I'm talking US, but here, let's take a look at the Mark 1A. It really jumps in price, because the Mark 1A jumps way up to 463 crore, or approximately 64 million US dollars, which basically that's about the cost of a Saab Gripen. But either way, guys, my name's Dave Walp, and I want to thank you guys for tuning in and learning about the HAL Tejas. I hope you guys like this video. And again, if you really like this one and you want more, military content, be sure to hit that like button, because, hey, that's how I know you guys are interested. Of course, I want to know, what is your thoughts on this aircraft? I also want to know, what is your favorite aircraft? And I also want to know, just for fun, what aircrafts can this aircraft beat? Let me know your thoughts down there. Oh yeah, by the way, I also forgot to mention that, as a matter of fact, when it comes to the HAL Tejas, one interesting thing, over 70% of this aircraft is made in India. Forgot that fact. It's pretty cool. Yeah. But thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you guys in the next one, and don't forget to check out our other videos up there, down there, and at the end of this video. Cool. Bye-bye. Okay, guys, so you made it to the end of the video. Here are some great playlists that you guys can check out. Got some really good stuff, especially all you people from India that want to learn more about your own militaries. Yo, go check it out. So you guys have yourself a good one, and I will see you guys in the next video.